Back in Jesus' day, they really didn't write much down because nobody read or wrote apart from the scribes. And what was written down was texts that were read out in the synagogues, or merchants' tallies, or public notices. And in fact, back in those days, if you could read, you always read out loud. Reading silently to yourself simply wasn't known. If you could read, then you shared whatever you read to other people. And of course, there wasn't any entertainment much, really. So a travelling storyteller like Jesus would have been quite popular, somebody coming along with new stories. And the fact of an oral tradition, which it would have been back in those days, is that it updates with the times. And Christianity really hasn't, because we've locked it down in stone, set it in graven images, which of course is a violation of the second commandment, and we don't update it and allow it. One of the things that does need to be updated, and seriously updated, is this idea of our Father, the Jesus prayer, and always looking at God as being male. Now, nowadays, it just doesn't really gel, because we understand that if we believe in God at all, that God is beyond being, that God is beyond gender, that God is beyond sex. God has no sex. Well, I don't know what happens in heaven, but we won't go there. Let's move swiftly on. However, Jesus says, "Our Father who art in heaven," and is always calling God Father. He calls him Abba, which is actually more like Papa or Daddy. However, what we need to see is how utterly radical that was then. It was heretical. It was extraordinary, because up until then, God had always been the Lord and the Master. God was still assumed to be male, which only happened after the fall of the first temple, which is a whole other subject which we'll be looking into. But the idea of looking at God as a parent, a loving parent who would take care of you, who would listen to you, who would speak to you, was revolutionary then. And I think it's really important for us to understand that Jesus was a revolutionary. He wasn't necessarily one of those zealots who wanted to turn the Romans out of Israel, though that's one of the reasons why they didn't want to save him when he was up for crucifixion, because he hadn't actually done what a Messiah was supposed to do, which was save the country. He was here to help us save our souls. And when I say saving souls, I actually mean helping to lift us up into the law of love rather than the law of restriction and actual law. It's entirely fair to say of Jesus that he interpreted all the law through love. And nowadays we tend to interpret love through the law. But this oral tradition was important. A lot of scholars think that there's a document called Q, which was the precursor to Mark, which is the first of the written down Gospels, because the synoptics, Matthew, Mark and Luke, are all really quite similar in the storytelling, and they think there was a base document that underlay those, and they were written on the back of it. But that really wouldn't wash in those days when so many people couldn't read or write. This would have been the oral tradition. Yes, there was stuff written down that was read out in the synagogues, but the meaning of the word synagogue is school. They're also called shul, which is another word for school. And in the synagogue, something would be read out and then it would be debated. And possibly, maybe the first Christians did that all the time. Somebody will have read something out to them, the scribe, and then they debate it. When I teach in churches, when I take church services, when I do the sermon, I always invite the people to debate if they want to. Very rarely do they. It's a very scary thing talking like that out loud to the vicar, but it's an option and it's what we should be doing. Sorry about the should, but actually talking about this tradition, updating this tradition, going into it, saying, yes, but I don't understand this, and what about that? And is that Greek actually accurate? And does that refer back to so-and-so? You probably think that would be the most boring thing on the planet, but trust me, I love it. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm doing more videos.